Why does that fully working 1,976 receiver on Facebook Marketplace keep costing more after you buy it? Because working is the most expensive word in vintage audio. You did not buy a finished stereo. You bought a 50-year-old chemistry experiment with wood side panels. The lights came on, a station came in, the seller said it sounded great last weekend. And now you own dried electrolyte, cracked solder, a power switch that will fail, and a restoration quote that is bigger than the purchase price. This is not a hate letter to Marantz, Pioneer, or Sansui. Some of that gear is genuinely special. This is the list collectors, techs, and forum regulars keep repeating after the honeymoon. The 5 things we actually hate about vintage stereo gear, the stuff Instagram never shows. 1. The gear is eating itself. The romantic story is they don't make them like this anymore. The physical story is that they used parts that were never designed to last half a century. Start with electrolytic capacitors. They are little cans of liquid electrolyte. Over decades, that liquid dries, capacitance drops, and ESR, the internal resistance, climbs. Techs describe the stages in the same order every time. First, you lose authority in the base because the power supply cannot hold the rail under load. Then you get grain, hum, and a soft, tired mid-range people mistake for warmth. Then a coupling cap leaks DC toward the output, and you get a thump at turn on or a smoked woofer. Restoration shops will tell you that once a unit is past about 35 to 40 years, this is not a maybe. It is the maintenance schedule. On Audio Karma, owners who actually pay the bill talk about it without the romance. One long thread updating 1970s receiver refurb costs put a Pioneer SX 1280 labor only recap, restore around $1,300. The same Poster's SX 1980 labor was $3,000 before parts, new filters, boards, and a cabinet. And he said he was into that one for $9,500 when it was done. That is not a cheap vintage score. That is a second mortgage on a boat anchor. The leak is not just electrical. Electrolyte is corrosive. It crawls across phenolic boards, eats copper traces, and turns a $20 capacitor job into a reconstructed circuit. Head Honesty's collector rundown put this at the top of the hate list for a reason. Ignore it and the board becomes the patient. Then there is the glue. Japanese factories in the export era used adhesive often called bond to keep big capacitors from ripping out in shipping. Decades later, that glue goes acidic. On Audio Science Review, a well-known thread with photos shows capacitor legs eaten away under the glue, invisible from both sides of the board. The cap cannot vent, the reaction travels up the sleeve. In ugly cases, the can let go. Techs who restore Onkyo M504S and similar late 70S, 80S power amps talk about this as a known time bomb, not a rare freak. REFA safety capacitors are the loud version of the same problem. Those rectangular paper and epoxy mains filters crack, drink moisture, and can fail with a bang and a puff of smoke. EEV blog made them infamous. The advice on every repair form is the same. If you see a REFA on the AC inlet, replace it with a modern X2 before you even enjoy the unit. Do not wait until it acts up. Sanyo STK hybrid output packs are another hate object. Yamaha's CR 440, 640, 840, 1040 era, and a pile of other late 70S and early 80S receivers use them to hit a price. When an STK dies, it often takes nearby resistors and traces with it. New old stock packs are a lottery. A lot of never buy videos, including the ones that warn specifically about those Yamaha CRX series units, exist because the failure is expensive and the substitute path is ugly. Hitachi 2SC458 transistors, especially the slant roof variant, show up in Marantz 1060 and 22XX conversations as a chronic, leaky, noisy, intermittent problem. Vintage Watts style buyer guides keep repeating it because it is not folklore. It is a parts family that aged badly. Tandberg owners on the UK Vintage Radio Forum have a different classic dry solder joints, so common that experienced techs say stop fault finding and reflow the boards and connectors first. Thermal cycling for 40 years, cracks joints around heavy transformers and big filter cans. The unit works until it is warm, then a channel dies, then it comes back when you tap the chassis. That is not character. That is a fractured joint. The hate here is simple. Vintage gear does not sit still. Even a unit that has lived on a shelf is aging. All original is not a compliment. On a 1974 receiver, it is a warning that the service is already overdue. 2. The parts you need do not exist. This is the one that turns a hobby into a scavenger hunt. Vintage YouTube repair channels keep the same laundry list. Output packs, CD lasers, cassette heads, potentiometers, plastic gears, faceplates, knobs, proprietary ICs, germanium transistors. Companies designed unique semiconductors so you had to stay in their ecosystem. 50 years later, that is a closed door. Kenwood KR 9600 owners run into TA 200W Darlington power packs that are effectively unobtainium. If the output stage dies, the pretty receiver becomes a parts donor. Sansui G-Series and late digital receivers eat custom ICs. The Sansui 9000, 900Z looks slick presets, spectrum analyzer, early, ADS future, and techs call it a nightmare because the complexity is married to chips you cannot buy. Carver magnetic field amps sound like a party trick until a normal bench tech has to troubleshoot a topology nobody else used. Even when a replacement exists, the market is polluted. Original Toshiba, 2SD424, 2SC524, style finals are gone. Chinese counterfeits are everywhere. The accepted modern substitutes, things like On Semiconductor MJ21193, MJ21194, pairs work if you know what you are doing. If you do not, you install fakes, the amp oscillates or runs hot, and you take out the new parts plus the drivers. Tuner sections are their own graveyard. Alignment requires gear and a patient. A weak FM complaint can be a dirty switch, a dried cap, or a front end that is drifted and will never be right without a sweep. Cassette decks need belts, idlers, and heads. Reel-to-reels need a technician who still likes them. German console systems, Telefunken, Grundig, the big furniture pieces look incredible in a living room and then reveal cabinet-specific mechanisms and unobtainable modules. The forum version of this hate is brutal and practical. Audio Karma and tape heads are full of "does anyone have a spare" posts that go unanswered. The spare is in another collector's parts unit, and that person is not selling. You cannot Amazon a 1978 lamp lens or a cracked Marantz 2270 faceplate and expect OEM. This is why "I can always fix it" is a beginner sentence. You can always try. The industry that made the part is gone. The bargain is a lie. Restoration eats the deal. People buy vintage to beat modern prices. Then they meet the bench. Published shop rates in 2025, 2026 conversations are not hobby friendly. One restoration house in Eugene has been cited with flat rate examples like about $945 for a Marantz. $2,270, $1,375 for a Pioneer SX. $1,250, $2,475 for a Sansui QRX 9001 plus extras. LED conversion, cabinet work, $110 an hour when the job leaves the script. Mid-tier recaps get quoted in the $400 to $700 range. Flagships run $600 to $1,200 and up just for capacitors and associated work. Wait times of 4 to 8 months are not an urban legend. There are fewer techs, and the good ones are booked. Do the math the way the 90% of vintage receivers are garbage videos do. A service Marantz 2270 might sell in the $2,000 to $3,000 range. A restored SX 1250 might live between $2,500 and $4,500. On those names, the restoration can almost close. On a realistic STA 2080 or an MCS 3338R, the same $800 to $1,200 of labor produces a finished unit worth $250 to $500. Technicians know this. A lot of them turn those jobs down. That is the dirty economic hate. The silver face you stole for $200 was never $200. It was $200 plus shipping, plus a dim bulb test, plus deoxit, plus a recap, plus a relay, plus a missing walnut case, plus the Saturday you spent chasing a noisy balance pot. YouTube videos on hidden costs keep repeating a complete system example. Purchase, recap, wood case, turntable, Advent style speakers, cables, and you are suddenly looking at $3,000 for a 1970s living room stack. a new Yamaha or WEM system can undercut that and come with a warranty. Restored on a listing is another tax. Some sellers mean a full recap, buy a set, clean controls, and a burn-in. Some mean they sprayed contact cleaner and replaced 2 lamps. The Dirty Truth videos are popular because buyers keep getting the second version. Recap is not a magic spell. A badly done recap lifts traces, reverses polarity, and creates a unit that is worse than tired original. Forum advice that used to be recap everything is now more careful. Refas and known leakers first. Power supply filters when they measure badly. Do not machine gun every coupling cap if you do not understand the circuit. QRX Restore style shops that have pulled thousands of caps have even published data that many electrolytics still measure decent at 30 years and fall off harder after 35. Blind recapping can injure a board that was only thirsty for a reflow. The hate is not that repair exists. The hate is that the purchase price was the down payment and nobody put that in the eBay title. 4. Buying and shipping are a contact sport. Vintage audio does not fail only on the bench. It fails in the transaction. Tested working often means the unit powered on and the FM light came on. It does not mean phono works, tape monitor works, both channels survive a load, or the protection relay is healthy. Buyer guides in 2026 keep saying the same thing. If the seller cannot verify input by input, you are gambling. Department store era product is the other trap. Sound design, Lloyd's, York's, Electrophonic, K-Part, a lot of later Marantz that is not a 2,270 inches any sense that matters. They were wide particle board boxes built to look like components at Kmart and Montgomery Ward. A Tapeheads owner described one sound design as no better than a stereo boombox. They were never reviewed in Stereophile. They still get listed next to real Pioneer SX1250s because they have wood grain and knobs. The 90% are garbage thesis is harsh, but the bottom of that market really is furniture with a radio in it. Then you have to move the thing. A Pioneer SX 1980 or Technics SA 1000 is an 80 to 90 pound object with a glass tuner window, a faceplate, and a transformer that wants to become a wrecking ball. Sellers forget to pull the platter from a turntable. They do not lock the tone arm. They use a Walmart box and a prayer. Boomboxery and Audio Karma are full of "it arrived destroyed" posts. Freight companies do not care that your childhood is in that carton. The selling side is just as ugly. eBay and reverb fees, packing time, the fear of a part swapper, someone who receives a working unit, harvests the rare output transistors, and opens a doesn't work case. Repair shop videos mention this because it happens. You also get the opposite. A buyer who expected a modern remote, HDMI, and a sub out then leaves a review because a 1975 receiver is a 1975 receiver. Craigslist and Marketplace add the human problem. No warranty. Meet in a parking lot. A unit that worked last night and now smells like a campfire when you get it home. Smoke damage is not a vibe. Nicotine soaks into the foam, the wood, the switch contacts, and the speaker cloth. A shop video about reasons not to buy vintage puts smell in the top 7 for a reason. You can clean a chassis. You cannot easily unsmoke a walnut cabinet. This is the social hate. The gear is heavy, fragile, and traded in a market with asymmetric information. The person who knows what a slant roof 2SC458 does is not the person writing, "Works great, no time wasters." 5. Living with it is a part-time job. Even a perfectly restored unit is not a modern appliance. The volume pot will crackle, the function switch will get scratchy, the balance control will go intermittent in one channel. Deoxit is a lifestyle. You will own more contact cleaner than most people own ketchup. That is not a cute hobby detail after the 3rd Saturday you spend pulling knobs. There is no remote on most of the silver-faced gods. No app, no room correction, no subwoofer out. Speaker terminals are often spring clips that hate modern banana plugs or weird proprietary posts. Heavy gauge speaker cable does not love those clips. You either adapt or you pretend 1/8 gauge lamp cord is still a personality. Heat is real. Those Class A/B tanks were designed in an era when a receiver was also a space heater. Put one in a closed console and you cook the caps you just replaced. Leave it on, because the power switch is the next failure point, a common community workaround on certain models, and you are paying the electric bill to keep a 1978 transformer warm. Tuner bulbs burn out. Meters stick. The wood case is chipped, and a reproduction sleeve costs more than a used NAD. The phono stage is only as good as a 1970s budget design, unless you are in the good Marantz, Sansui, Pioneer tier, and even then, a modern $100 phono preamp can beat a tired onboard circuit. Safety is the adult version of this hate. Two-prong cords, missing death cap replacements, no isolation, leaking coupling caps on the speaker outputs. A vintage receiver is mains electronics with 50-year-old insulation. If you do not know what a dim bulb tester in a Variac R4, you should not be the first person to power it after a decade in a basement. And then there is the sound, which is the argument nobody wants. A lot of vintage receivers were voiced for the speakers of their decade. Inefficient, cheerful, a little honky, a lot of hi-fi. Pre-1974 FTC music power ratings were a circus. Lafayette and others got caught re-rating fantasy wattage down to honest numbers. A Marantz 2600 can sit at a 5-figure asking price and still lose a damping factor pissing match with a $380 modern Yamaha. That does not make the Marantz worthless. It means the nostalgia tax is not a measurement. Later 1970s and early 1980s, cost cutting is the other hangover. Pioneer going from an SX 1250 boat to much smaller, hotter, module-driven models in a few years. Brands changing hands, Sansui's later corporate mess. Marantz on a particle board SR 1000 is not the 2270 family. Collectors hate this because the logo is doing the selling. Daily use also means you are the service department. Foam in vintage speakers rots the famous foam rot on AR, Advent, JBL, and 100 others. You refoam or you listen to a floppy bass, crossovers drift. Tweeters open. The pair you bought for the look needs a rebuild before it is a speaker again. The hate, finally, is lifestyle mismatch. If you want to walk in, tap a phone, and hear a record quality stream in a corrected room, vintage is a costume. If you like the ritual warm-up, deoxit, a dim bulb, a forum thread at 11 p.m. about a bias setting, then the hate is just the price of admission. The people who last in this hobby are the ones who knew that before the first silver face showed up on the porch. If you still want in, steal the forum rules, the version people learned, the expensive way, buy what technicians still smile at when it walks in the door. A Pioneer SX 650, SX 750, SX 850, or SX 950. Amarantz 2230, 2245, 2270, a Sansui 5000 6000 era receiver if the boards are not a science project of lifted traces. Those units have manuals, known transistor substitutions, and 1,000 audio karma threads that already solved your exact symptom. What they do not want is the last gasp digital receiver with a custom CPU, a fluorescent display, and an IC that has not been made since 1984. That is the unit that sits on the shelf for 8 months while the tech waits on a dead-end eBay listing. Avoid SDK pack specials unless you already have a donor or discrete conversion plan. The Yamaha CR 440 through 1040 look like a deal until one hybrid module takes the drivers and a corner of the board with it. Avoid the department store names. Sound Design, Lloyd's, York's, Electrophonic, no matter how wide the wood grain is. A Tapehead's regular once opened a Sound Design and said the guts were a boombox and a tuxedo. He was not being cute. Budget the recap before you bid, not after the dopamine hits. A working SX 750 at $250 is not $250. Add freight, a dim bulb setup, deoxit, lamps, and a $400, $700 service if you are not doing it yourself. People on Audio Karma have posted SX 1280 labor around $1,300 and SX 1980 jobs that ran into thousands once filters, boards, and a cabinet entered the chat. If the finished market value of that realistic is $400, a $900 shop quote is not a restoration. It is a donation. Ask for a video. Both channels, a real speaker load, tuner, aux, and phono. Lights on is not a test. The classic marketplace tragedy is a receiver that played a station last night and arrives with one dead channel, a rattling transformer, and a walnut case that was never packed for a 40-pound brick. Factor shipping, as if that transformer wants to murder the faceplate, because it does. Pull the turntable platter, lock the arm, double box. The boomboxery posts about units that arrived as a bag of knobs are not hypothetical. On arrival, do not plug it in like a toaster. Open it, smell it. Look for leaking cans, brown glue, and reefer bricks on the inlet. First power is dim bulb, no treasured speakers. Clean the pots. Measure DC offset. If you see more than a few tens of millivolts, the woofers you love are not the test load. Recap the reefas and the obvious leakers before you fall in love with the tuner glow. Be honest about why you want it. If the pitch is, this will beat a Wim Amp Ultra and a pair of modern bookshelves for less money, run the real total and include your time. If the pitch is, I want that silver face, I will maintain it, and I already know what a dim bulb tester is, you are the customer this gear was waiting for. Everyone else is buying a part-time job with a wood case. We hate the caps that eat boards. We hate the chips that vanished. We hate the restoration quote. We hate the shipping and the word working. We hate the crackle, the heat, the smell, and the way a logo can hide a Kmart special. We also keep buying it. That is the joke, and it is the truth. Vintage stereo is not a product category anymore. It is a relationship with decaying matter. Go into that relationship with your eyes open, or go buy something with a warranty and spend the difference on records. If you have a repair bill that still makes you angry, drop the model and the number in the comments. If you want the companion video, the vintage pieces that are still worth the headache, say so. I will see you on the bench.